When they came out of the buffet, Mr. Brown had already found a taxi, and he waved them across. The driver looked hard at Paddington, and then at the inside of his nice clean taxi. "Bears is 6pence extra," he said, gruffly. "Sticky Bears is 9pence. "He can't help being sticky, driver," said Mr. Brown. "He's just had a nasty accident." The driver hesitated. "All right, hop in." Paddington stood on the tip-up seat behind the driver so that he could see out the window. Mr. Brown leaned forward. "Number 32 Windsor Gardens." The driver cupped his ear with one hand. "Can't hear ya," he shouted. Paddington tapped him on the shoulder. "Number 32 Windsor Gardens," he repeated. The taxi driver jumped at the sound of Paddington's voice and narrowly missed hitting a bus. He looked down at his shoulder and glared. "Cream!" he said. "All over me new coat." "Oh dear," thought Paddington. "I'm in trouble again." Judy giggled and gave his paw a friendly squeeze. "I think I'm going to like staying with the Browns," thought Paddington. But at long last they arrived at number 32 Windsor Gardens, where the Brown family lived. "Now you are going to meet Mrs. Bird," said Judy. "She's a bit fierce sometimes, but I'm sure you'll like her." "I'm sure if you say so," said Paddington. "The thing is, will she like me?" The door was opened by a stout, motherly lady with a kindly twinkle in her eye. "Goodness gracious!" she exclaimed when she saw Paddington. "Whatever have you got there?" "It's not a what," said Judy. "It's a bear. His name's Paddington, and he's coming to stay with us." "Mercy me!" cried Mrs. Bird. "I haven't put clean sheets in the spare room or anything. Though, judging by the state he's in, perhaps that's just as well. I think he'd better have a bath straight away." "I've had an accident with a cream bun, Mrs. Bird," said Paddington, as Judy led him upstairs for a bath. "Where did you say you came from?" called Mrs. Bird. "Darkest Peru," replied Paddington. Said Mrs. Bird. "Then I expect you like marmalade. I'd better get some extra supplies in." "Fancy knowing I like marmalade," said Paddington, as Judy led the way towards the bathroom. "Mrs. Bird knows everything about everything," said Judy's brother Jonathan. While Jonathan got the bath ready, Judy explained matters to Paddington. "There's one tap marked hot," she said, "and one marked cold. Here's a cake of soap and a clean towel. Oh, and there's a brush so that you can scrub your back." "It sounds very complicated," said Paddington. "Couldn't I just sit in the puddle?" "I don't think Mrs. Bird would approve of that," said Judy. "And don't forget to wash your ears. They look awfully black." "They're meant to be black!" exclaimed Paddington hotly. "I think." After Jonathan and Judy had left, Paddington peered at his ears in the mirror. He decided that perhaps they were rather black after all. Luckily, there was a tube of white stuff on the wash basin, so he was soon able to put them right again. After that, Paddington tried writing his name on the mirror, but it was much longer than he expected, and he soon ran out of toothpaste. He was beginning to feel hungry again, but the cake of soap Judy had given him didn't taste like any sort of cake he'd ever eaten before. In fact, it made him feel rather sick. Unaware of the problems Paddington was having, Jonathan and Judy got ready for tea in the room below. "I do wish Paddington could stay for good," said Judy. "He's all alone, and London is such a big place if you have nowhere else to go." "I dare say," said Mr. Brown, "but I never still think we ought to report the matter to someone. Anyway," he added darkly, "it all depends on Mrs. Bird." Just then the door opened, and Mrs. Bird herself came in. Everyone went very quiet as they waited to see what she had to say. "I suppose you want to tell me you've decided to keep that young bear," she said. "I must say I'm very pleased. He raised his hat, and I like bears with good manners." "Fancy that," said Mrs. Brown, after Mrs. Bird had gone. "Whoever would have thought that when we left home this morning that we'd end up having a bear living with us?" "Hooray!" said Judy. "I can't wait to tell Paddington just as soon as he's finished his bath." But far from finishing his bath, Paddington hadn't even started yet. He was too busy drawing a map of darkest Peru on the bathroom floor with some of Mr. Brown's shaving cream. In fact, he was so busy, it wasn't until he felt a trickle of water run down the back of his neck that he realised that the bath was full of foaming water. He tried looking for the taps, but he couldn't find them anywhere. And when he stood up again, he couldn't see the bathroom either. In the end, he decided there was only one thing for it, and that was to jump in. But he soon discovered it's one thing jumping into a bath, but it's quite another matter getting out again, especially when the sides are slippery and your eyes are full of soap. He tried bailing out some of the water with his hat. Then he called out, "Help!" at first in a quiet voice, so that he wouldn't disturb anyone, and then in a much louder voice, "Help! Help!" "That's funny," said Mr. Brown. "I could have sworn I felt a spot of water." "So did I," said Jonathan. Judy jumped to her feet, pulling Jonathan after her. "Come on!" she hissed. "What's up?" asked Jonathan. "It must be to do with Paddington," whispered Judy. "I bet he's in trouble again." "Are you all right, Paddington?" called Judy. "No," cried Paddington. "I'm not. I think I may be going to drown." "Gosh!" said Jonathan, when he saw the state the bathroom was in. "What a mess! Even I've never made a mess like this." "Oh, Paddington," said Judy, as she and Jonathan helped him out of the bath. "Thank goodness you're all right. I should never have forgiven myself if anything had happened to you." "It's a good job I was wearing my hat," said Paddington. "Why on earth didn't you pull the plug out?" asked Jonathan. "Nobody said anything about that," said Paddington. "I wish you really had sat in a puddle now. I shall never, ever have a proper bath again." All the same, when Paddington came downstairs again, everyone had to admit that he was looking much, much cleaner than when they had first met him. Mrs. Bird brought in a fresh pot of tea and a large pile of marmalade sandwiches, and in no time at all, things were back to normal. But before he went to bed that night, Paddington had one more go at having a bath, only this time he made sure the taps were turned off. "It's what's known as a dry bath," he announced. "It's safer than using water and it's much less messy."